Good morning. I want to welcome each of you to Hill Country Bible Church, those joining us online, our venues across the campus, Steiner Ranch. We're just so grateful to be together, and it's the season, right? We know it's the season because the music tells us it's the season. One of the coolest things about Christmas songs is it kind of brings together everybody, the old and the young and everybody in between. We love these songs. And the songs, in many ways, are some insight into our souls. So I don't know what that means for those of you whose favorite carol is Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. But it does say something, right? One of the most endearing Christmas songs is Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Let me remind you of the words. Here we go. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. From now on, our troubles will be miles away. Here we are as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us gather near to us once more. And then everything's perfect, right? Through the years, we all will be together if the fates allow. In the crescendo, hang a shining star upon the highest bough and have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Now, you might be interested to know that this is version 3 of this song. Version 1 of the song was written by the two men that wrote the second version and the third version, and their first version was written for a movie script of a sad movie, and Judy Garland, who was supposed to sing it, said, "That's too depressing. I won't sing that in the movie." And so thus came version 2. Frank Sinatra came along and said, "I will sing your song if you make it even nicer." And that's where this particular version came from. Are you interested in knowing what the first version was? I call this the COVID version. Here we go. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. It may be your last. Like this is actual, okay? I didn't make this up. Next year, we may all be living in the past. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Pop that champagne cork. Next year, we may all be living in New York. Now, that would be a horror, right? Pardon me to any online people that are living in New York. We have a little bit of room left in Texas. Little bit. Not much, but we have a little bit. Okay. No good times like the olden days. Happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who were dear to us will be near to us no more. Socially distanced, appropriately. But at least we all will be together if the Lord allows. From now on, we'll have to muddle through somehow and have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Interesting in what a year can do, right? All of a sudden, this may be the most relevant version of the song that actually needs to be sung to put things in perspective. When you compare the songs of Christmas to the songs that were originally sung at the birth of Jesus, the contrast is quite chilling and quite stark. In fact, this series that we're going to be in for the next 3 weeks starting today was something that came about as I was reading the Gospel of Luke in my quiet time, my time with the Lord, a couple months ago. And when I read the first 2 chapters, I realized there are 4 songs that are part of the original Christmas experience. We don't sing any of these 4 songs, so I decided to do a sermon series on the 4 songs that were sung by the people who were actually involved in the original Christmas experience. And so today we're going to be looking at Mary's song, and Mary's song is very different. In fact, as you look at Mary's song, it's going to prompt the question that I want you to wrestle with during this message, and that's this. This Christmas, will we be muddling through or magnifying our experience with God? Will we be muddling through somehow, like the song said? I mean, it's COVID. We can't all be together. When we're together, we're wondering who's going to come and tell on us. Like, can we travel? Somebody going to get sick? Like, that's this year, muddling through. Or will we be experiencing God in a magnified way? Now, let me just give you a little bit of a preview of what we're going to get before we get to it. I believe that muddling through describes our common experience of Christmas. And the reason why I think that's true, and even beyond COVID, is because I think we approach Christmas with the mentality of a party. Now, think about that for a minute. It makes some sense to us because Jesus' birthday. So why wouldn't we have a birthday party, so to speak? Now let's break down the anatomy of a party, right? What does a party start with? Well, a party starts with a lot of planning and preparation. You got to figure out the decorations, you got to figure out the presents, you got to figure out the food. Like, that's what a party involves. So a lot of work on the front end, getting a lot of stuff done. Christmas, we're putting up decorations, we're figuring out the gifts, we're figuring out the food. And then the party happens. And the party is a couple hours of everybody getting together, and it's all fun, and we're enjoying, and we're celebrating together. We've got a couple postable pics that we can take. Maybe we're going to bring the family together. We're going to take the picture so we have the Christmas card for next year. And then comes the aftermath, or the cleanup phase. And there's something that happens in the cleanup phases. We're taking it all down, putting it all away. That feeling that happened during the couple hours of our celebration has now worn off. The whole thing feels a little bit like a lot of work that went into it. I've lost that sense of excitement. My bank account is now thin again. And I wonder, like, wasn't Christmas supposed to do something more than this for me? Wasn't there supposed to be more? Anybody ever feel that way? You ever feel a little bit of a build-up, excitement, and then kind of a letdown afterwards? I think the possibility is that we've got the wrong understanding of what Christmas actually is, and the way we celebrate it has very little to do with Christmas. As we take a look at the people involved and their experience of Christmas, my prayer is that your experience with Christmas would mirror more of theirs than what we typically experience. In other words, rather than muddling through the season and coming out with a little bit of an emptiness and disappointment at the end, maybe this Christmas you'll have a magnifying experience of God. You say, even during COVID? Yes. In fact, actually, it may be because of COVID that you'd be willing to look at Christmas in the light of what the Bible says. And so in order to do that, we're going to look at a couple of people in Scripture, and the first song, and the person we're going to see the song written by is Mary herself. So we have a pregnant, out-of-wedlock teenage girl that is going to be the second primary player in the story only to Jesus himself. So if you grab your Bibles and open them to Luke chapter 1, we're going to jump in at verse 26. We're going to jump in at verse 26. And in verse 26, as we jump in here, I just want you to understand a little bit of a different way of thinking about Christmas, okay? So as we come to Christmas, we encounter God as we receive his gracious assignments. What does that mean? Like, you mean my experience with God this Christmas is some degree based on my willingness to accept and receive the assignments that God's given me? I want you to see what Mary does and how she experiences him. So let's start in verse 26. It says, in the 6th month, what's the 6th month? The 6th month is the 6th month of Elizabeth, Mary's aunt's pregnancy. Now, we'll meet Elizabeth a little bit more in this message, and we'll meet her a lot more in the one coming next week as we look at her pregnancy. Elizabeth is old, like think 60s and 70s, never been able to have children, and miraculously, she's going to conceive in her old age, and she's going to be the mother of John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus, who becomes the forerunner of Jesus in the Gospels. So in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. So we are now going to meet Mary, and here's the main thing we learn about Mary. Mary is a young, obedient girl. That's all we get. Now, if you're under 15 in the audience, that's what you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about Mary. She's probably 13, 14, 15 at the oldest, because most Jewish girls in that culture were married by age 15. So she's engaged to be married. So for those of you who think, like, I'm sitting in big church, this is for my parents, just tell your parents, I'll fill you in at the end, because this is for you. If you're sitting there and you're in the latter years of your life and you're thinking, I've heard this story 1,000 times before. I could tell it to you. I know everything about it. This is for you too. And everybody in the middle, you're spectators, okay? But you can learn something, so hang in there with me. Here we go. So what happens? The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Now that phrase, "the Lord is with you," if you've been with us through the Joseph series, we find that that phrase comes up about Joseph too. The Lord is with you. Whenever that phrase comes up, the Lord is with you, something important is about to happen. Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God." Now, here's what's important for you to get at this point. When God says, "I'm going to favor you," he's not talking about favorable circumstances. He's not talking about a favorable reception from the people in your life. In other words, if your prayer is, bless me, Lord, make my life wonderful, fulfill my dreams, do everything for me, fill my bank account, and all of those things that we tend to think are blessings, you've missed the whole point. God bless me this year with a happy, fun, exciting Christmas. The favor of the Lord is much different than you think. You say, well, what is it? Well, the angel tells her. The angel says, "Do not be afraid, Mary, you found favor with God. You will be with child and give birth to a son. And you are to give him the name Jesus," which means God saves. "He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord will give him the throne of his father David. He will reign over the house of Jacob forever. His kingdom will never end." In other words, you're going to be pregnant and you're going to give birth to the Messiah. Now, everything in her life is complicated and compromised because of this. She's engaged to be married. She's got her life planned out. In her culture, being pregnant and trying to explain to everybody, well, this is miraculous. It's a virgin birth. The angel told me is a story that would be as hard to believe in their day as it would to believe in our day. Mary is receiving an assignment. It's not an easy assignment. It will shake the foundation of everything in her life. And her assignment is to be the mother of the Messiah. That is being favored. That is mind-blowing. And so she responds, "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I'm a virgin." She doesn't doubt what he's saying. What she doesn't understand is how she's going to get pregnant. Like, what's going to happen to me? Verse 35, the angel answered, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you, so that the Holy One to be born to you will be called the Son of God. Somehow, in a miraculous way, the Holy Spirit is going to come, and somehow, in a supernatural way, her DNA and the Spirit's divinity will be commingled in this child so that he's fully divine and fully human. And Mary, you're going to bring half of that to the equation. Like, this is going to be your flesh and blood. You get the privilege of doing that. You're going to carry this child for 9 months. The first sounds this child will ever hear in the womb is the beating of your heart. And then you're going to be able to deliver this child and raise this child as your son. That's the assignment. How does she respond to that? Look at what she says, the angel says to give her help. He says in verse 36, even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who is said to be barren is in her 6th month, for nothing is impossible with God. So how does Mary respond? I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. May it be to me as you have said. And then the angel left. So now you understand. What is Mary? She's young and obedient. She says, listen, okay, I'm in. Right like that, on the spot. Now, let's talk about obedience for a minute. When it comes to obedience, what we see in Mary is, first of all, obedience requires belief. She believes that what the angel is telling her is factually true. Like, something's going to happen, it's going to be real, it's really going to happen factually. She also trusts that what is going to happen to her, as the angel explains it to her, that what he's saying really will happen. This will be the Messiah. In addition to that, we see her obedience is also surrender. She is now willing to give up all of her current plans to be on this assignment. In other words, if Joseph rejects her, if her family views her in a terrible light, like if she gets kicked out of the clubs, if the girls at school will never talk to her again, and all there is bullying and gossip on social media, like, she's okay with that. I mean, she's not happy about it, but she's willing to surrender. In other words, I'm taking on this assignment, which means the life that I planned and orchestrated for myself probably isn't going to happen the way I thought it was, and that's okay. And finally, she's willing to go into action. She finds out that Elizabeth is pregnant in her 6th month, her relative, and so we see what she does. She immediately takes off. It says in verse 39, at that time Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zachariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. So she's going into action. Now here's something that's really important for us to understand. If you're wanting to experience God in a greater way, but you're unwilling to accept His assignments for you. In other words, what He's created you to do and what He's called you to do, why would you think that you would experience God in a greater way? In fact, what's interesting is, out of all the women on the planet, God picks Mary, and the number one thing that we see about her is her willingness to say yes to God. Implication? How many other women, if He would have come to them and given the same exact opportunity, would have said, no, like, I don't look good pregnant. Like, that's really hard. What about Joseph? In other words, if you're the kind of person who you've got all of your life planned and you've got your dreams out there and you're going to live your life your way, and you are never going to say yes to God taking you on a detour, because as far as you're concerned, God's job in your life is to bless your will, not for Him to guide you into His will, chances are you're going to miss out on God's call on your life. And God will remain very small to you while you muddle through this life that you've created for yourself and that you're planning and you're doing it on your own. The opposite of that is Mary's response. Mary says, "May it be to me as you have said, not as I have dreamed." Great question to ask yourself. Is life about me? Because if it is, be prepared to have a very small experience with God. Now, the second person we meet is Elizabeth. And on the other hand, here's what we see in her. Elizabeth is an old but faith-filled woman. I think it's so interesting, the contrast, that God chooses Elizabeth, old, barren, never had a kid, always wanted one, but now she's way beyond childbearing years. She's pregnant. And Mary, this young girl that has no relationships with anybody, and she, in her youth, is obedient. Students, this is really important. Like, start obeying God young before you get so sophisticated and cynical like the old people that we don't tend to do that. In contrast to that, Elizabeth has been around for a long time. She's prayed. She's seen God work. She's heard the promises, and she's seen them fulfilled. She's been a faithful person. And her response to Mary and her situation is to say, okay, God, I believe in you. I trust you. I'm going to operate in faith. Watch how this unfolds. I love this passage. In verse 41, when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, so Mary comes in, says hello. She's traveled quite a ways to get there. She comes in and says hello. When she hears her greeting, the baby leaped in her womb. Like the baby starts dancing on her bladder. Some of you know what that feels like, right? I don't. Just put that out there. The baby starts dancing inside of her. And Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit, which means the next words out of her mouth are going to be inspired by the Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" Notice the two of them have the same attitude. She says, who am I? That Mary, you, the mother of God, is coming to me. Who am I? Mary has already said, who am I? That I would bear the mother of God, or that I would be the mother of God. The characteristic of both of these women is humility. The characteristic of our culture is not. The characteristic of our culture is self-promotion. Market yourself, get your own brand, put yourself out there, make yourself famous, make your blog something people want to read, or make your YouTube channel something that everybody wants to watch, because the only way you get ahead in this life is me, right? That's our culture. This idea to look at yourself and go, I'm really not that important of a person, is the opposite of the way we operate. But it's hard to be obedient when you think you're the boss. It's hard to trust someone else when you always trust yourself. If you don't have faith, trust somebody else, you tend to trust only one. That's me. Christmas is not about that. It's about obeying God, trusting God, and in that, our experience with God grows. She says in verse 44, "As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed what the Lord has said to her will be accomplished." She has faith, and she projects that faith onto Mary to encourage her. What an incredible moment. Let me just say, it's hard to have faith if you're clouded by cynicism, if you're clouded by skepticism. In other words, if you're the kind of person who says, if it's too good to be true, it's not true, How do you encounter God working in ways that are so weirdly different? Like picking a teenage girl to be the mother of Jesus. That is so weird. Like, why not pick somebody that has a PhD in child psychology? Or somebody that's got a master's degree in divinity? Like, now, why not pick somebody that's rich instead of a girl from a little village of about 200 people where the average home in the town is actually a cave that's been made into a home? I've walked on the streets. I've been there. I've seen the caves. I've been in Bethlehem of her day. Like, why would you pick somebody that's poor? Like, come on, God. You see, God doesn't make sense most of the time. And so if you tend to be skeptical, cynical, I don't really believe of anything that's good, it's hard to experience God growing large in you. Now we move to Mary's song. So in the next verse, she breaks out into song. And here's what we see at Christmas, that we actually will experience Christmas if we encounter God as we reflect on his great works. Like, if you can't see what God has done and what he's doing, you're not going to have a magnifying experience of God at Christmas. If you do, your experience of God will grow. I want you to see how she says this. It's really profound. And Mary said, so Elizabeth says, praise God for you believing and being willing to do this. And Mary said, my soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the mighty one has done great things for me. Holy is his name. That song starts to burst out of her. Now let me set it up, and then we'll take the song apart a little bit, and I'll fill you in on what she's actually saying here. First of all, when she starts and she says, my soul magnifies or glorifies the Lord, that word, glorify or magnify, means to enlarge. We get that, right? What do you do with a magnifying glass? You take something that's hard to see, and you blow it up so you can really see what it is. And here's what she's saying. She's saying, in the midst of seeing what God is doing with me, all of a sudden, my soul has grown in capacity to understand the magnitude of how great and how amazing and how wonderful God is. In other words, now I'm beginning to get it. I'm beginning to get a universe-sized vision of God, and it's blowing my mind. It's blowing my heart. I'm overwhelmed now with who God is and what he's doing with me. And that erupts, the passage says, in her soul rejoices. Like she can't help it. Have you ever been in one of those moments in life when you had that aha second and all of a sudden everything became clear to you and it just started bursting out of you? Maybe you even babbled and couldn't even talk well because like, oh my goodness, the lights just got turned on. Or maybe you've been one of those people that every time that would start to happen, you'd shut it down because it's too good to be true. It's not true. She's just blown away. She can't believe it, that God would do what he's doing and that God would use her to do it. What's she saying? Here's the principle. God sees the humble and does great things through them. God sees the humble and does great things through them. She's like, whoa, now I know you, God. I don't have to bring anything. I don't have to be anyone. You just love me and you chose me. That's all. That's who you are. I love this story. For those people who think that the Bible's down on women, you haven't read the Bible. Like the two most important people in the world at the birth of Christ are Mary and Elizabeth. Two most important people on the planet, Mary and Elizabeth. Like you think about all the rulers of that day who were in their palaces and in their nice houses, the people who controlled the economics, the Jerusalem Stock Exchange and the Roman Stock Exchange, the people who bought and sold and traded people's lives as if they were nothing. They don't matter. The only two people that matter in the story are an old woman and a young girl. And they are going to carry forth the plan of God to save the planet, to bring his salvation, his Messiah to the world. Can you believe that? Like these two women. And here's what's so cool. God brings them together. So Elizabeth's 6 months pregnant. Mary just conceived. Mary's going to spend 3 months with Elizabeth until she gives birth. And who can they tell but each other? Who would ever believe? So God puts these two together. So here's a young girl going through morning sickness with an old woman who's going through geriatric labor. And like a young and an old person, they find that they've got more in common than anybody else. And they cling to each other in faith. And they are in a place that nobody even could pinpoint on the map. And yet they are the ones who God's going to use to change the world. Sometimes we think that what's happening in Washington or in Brussels or in Beijing really matters, like it's important. Not according to God. You see, God sees the humble and does great things through them. If you don't get that, God stays really small in you. God stays really small in you. Second thing that we see in this passage, which is really important, in the song, God turns the self-serving values of this world upside down. Look at what Mary says. She's singing still. She says in verse 50, his mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. Like God is constantly working with those people who fear him and follow him from generation to generation. Is that you? Would you be one of those people in this generation that God's working through? You fear him and follow him. He extends his mercy to you. Then he says this. She says this. He performed mighty deeds with his arm. He scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. The proud in their inmost thoughts, hang on to that. He's brought down the rulers from their thrones. Hang on to that. But has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but sent the rich away empty. He's turning the tables of the values. What are the things that are valuable to humanity? Those who are proud in their inmost thinking. In other words, those people who have the sense of self, that I'm important and I'm significant and I'm the one who's going to shape the future of my world. He says, I don't really work with those people very well. Those who are rulers, the people who have the power in this world, that make or break decisions that affect your lives. God says, yeah, I don't use those people either. The rich in the world, who it's all about their experience of life. God says, yeah, they're not my prime people. Like, I like teenage girls and old women. Those are people I like. I can work with them. I could change the world with them. Here's the thing that struck me. Like, I'm working through this passage, and all of a sudden, like the Spirit of God is saying to me, hey, Tim, the way you did life as you were raising your kids, did you give them the impression that doing real well financially, being a real powerful person, being somebody that's really important, those are the most important things to life? And I was like, because that's what we do, right? We're raising our kids to believe this. The college you get into, that's so important. It's a scary thought that we could be actually indoctrinating the next generation into things that God says, you know what? Like these kind of things that are important to people, these values that are self-serving, you're never going to understand me. When those things, those idols, occupy the major part of your heart. And Mary just lays it out there. Like, all of a sudden, God is so big because everything else, in light of him, is so small. She finishes by saying, God takes care of Israel and keeps his promise. Verse 54, he's helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as he has said to our fathers. God follows through. He keeps his promise. A story I came across a while back really spoke to me about this. Journalist Lee Strobel was working for the Chicago Tribune, and during one Christmas, he was assigned to go do a story on an impoverished family. Now, keep in mind at the time, Lee Strobel was a confirmed atheist, very antagonistic, thought Christianity was crazy, and he goes to meet this family, and when he gets there, he's surprised at their attitude in light of their condition. He writes this. He said, the Delgados, 60-year-old Perfecta, and her granddaughters, Lydia and Jenny, had been burned out of their roach-infested tenement and were now living in a tiny 2-room apartment on the west side. This is Chicago. As I walked in, I couldn't believe how empty it was. There were no furniture, no rugs, nothing on the walls, only a small kitchen table and one handful of rice. That's it. They were virtually devoid of all possessions. In fact, 11-year-old Lydia and 13-year-old Jenny owned only one short-sleeved dress each, plus one thin gray sweater between them. When they walked the half-mile to school through the biting cold, Lydia would wear the sweater for part of the distance and then hand it to her shivering sister, who would wear it the rest of the way. But despite their poverty and the painful arthritis that kept Perfecta from working, she still talked confidently about her faith in Jesus. She was convinced that he had not abandoned them and never sensed despair or self-pity in her home. Instead, there was a gentle feeling of hope and peace. Strobel completed his his article, and published it, then moved on to other things. And during the course of the Christmas season, kind of the emptiness started to fill him up a little bit, and he wondered, I wonder how the Delgados are doing. So he paid them a visit, and when he went to see them, he was surprised because after he published this article, the community just overwhelmed them with stuff. He walks in, there's furniture everywhere, there's Christmas trees, decorations, there's food in the pantries, there's all kinds of Christmas presents, there's a complete wardrobe for all 3 of them, there was a bunch of money that had been donated, like the place was just packed with stuff from people's generosity. But it wasn't the gifts that shocked Strobel, an atheist, looking at the Christmas generosity of people. It was actually the family's response to their gifts. He writes, I was surprised by this outpouring. I was even more astonished by what my visit was interrupting. Perfecta and her granddaughters were getting ready to give away much of their newfound wealth. When I asked Perfecta why, she replied in halting English, our neighbors are still in need. We cannot have plenty while they have nothing. This is what Jesus would want us to do. That blew me away. If I had been in their position at that time in my life, I would have been hoarding everything. I asked Perfecta what she thought about the generosity of the people who had sent all of these goodies, and again her response amazed me. This is wonderful. This is very good, she said, gesturing to all the largesse. We did nothing to deserve this. It's a gift from God. But, she added, it's not his greatest gift. Tomorrow, we celebrate that. That is Jesus. To her, this child in the manger was the undeserving gift that meant everything. More than material possessions, more than comfort, more than security. And at that moment, something inside of me wanted desperately to know this Jesus. Because in a sense, I saw in Perfecta and her daughters, they had peace despite poverty, while I had anxiety despite plenty. They knew the joy of generosity, while I only knew the loneliness of ambition. They looked heavenward for hope. I looked only out for myself. They experienced the wonder of the spiritual, while I was shackled to the shallowness of the material. And something made me long for what they had, or more accurately, for the one that they knew. My prayer for you this Christmas is that you would reach out and embrace God in a way that he would begin to grow in you, so that like Perfecta, your experience with him is the only thing you treasure. And only then will you find the joy of Christmas. Let's just bow our heads and take a moment to reflect. What is God saying to you now?
Who am I to come before you? I am just a sinner.